Hello, and in this tutorial I'm going to show you how you can do some kind of neat effects in InDesign. So I'm going to select my text here, and right now it's just kind of flat and floating on here. If I select it, if I go to Object, Effects, you'll see that I can create a lot of different effects for my text here. Now the thing with effects is that you have to be careful when using them. If you use them in a kind of an incorrect sort of way, meaning that if you use too many at once, then it winds up looking really obvious that you used an effect rather than a design. You want to use something that's complementary and very subtle. You don't want people to be distracted that you used all these effects and it takes away from your actual design. So for example, let's go ahead and use a drop shadow. That's a pretty common one. And my dialog box will show up. I notice that preview is unchecked, so I want to see the preview of how the shadow is going to look. And there's my shadow. I can change the settings of whatever I want, or I can continue to add or change to whatever setting I want it to be. So for example, I just changed it from a drop shadow to a bevel and emboss. Everything is grayed out because you're still in the drop shadow screen. See how it's highlighted? To affect the bevel and emboss, I got to click on that and it allows me the features that I want to use. Now, these don't work quite as proficiently as you may be accustomed to in Photoshop. Again, InDesign can do some things, but it's really designed that you have all of your stuff figured out already and built in other softwares, and then you just import them into InDesign. So I'm going to change this drop shadow because black is really a heavy shadow. Let's see. Doesn't look like it's letting me click it. Let's try it like this. We'll just dial down the opacity of it a little bit. So it's not quite so heavy. Again, we want kind of subtlety to this. I can adjust the distance of it so that it gets a little closer. And the size of it I'll lower a little bit too, so I can either make it a harder edge, which is 0, or I can adjust it so it's a nice, soft, subtle edge. I'm going to hit OK. Now, this is a shape, so I can actually even put, if I want onto it, let's put a stroke color around it. We're going to give it its nice yellow so that it has a little pop off of that blue background. I'm going to go back up into my effects again, and instead I'm going to create an inner drop shadow. I'm going to do the same thing where I'm going to lower the opacity of that shadow so it's not quite so dark. Again, I have my preview button on, so I want to make sure that I see it live. I'm going to lower the size of that. I'm going to shorten the distance. Oops. Now again, you can adjust these numbers any way that you want, but unlike Photoshop, there's only so far that you can go with it. Again, you can kind of adjust it however you want. So, hit OK. And now you can see that I was able to create some effects using InDesign, but it's very limited in what it can do. And so sometimes you'll see that even though you created these effects, it'll sometimes create some awkward looking moments that you just don't have the degree of design control, or rather creative and graphic control, that you do with Illustrator and Photoshop. Because that's what those are tools are really designed for. So InDesign has some aspects that you want to use and can use effectively, but sometimes less is usually more. So we're going to go back to the effects. I'm going to turn off that inner drop shadow. Okay. And of course, I encourage you to kind of play with things to see what they do. Let's get smooth. Yeah, we kind of like the look of that. Because subtlety is going to be more of a key to the creativity. You don't want them to be distracted too much by all the effects that they totally miss your message. And that's how we use effects in InDesign.